All right, let's talk about one of the most famous and most misunderstood phrases in all of science, survival of the fittest. It's been used to explain everything from why a company succeeds to why inequality exists. But what if I told you that almost everything we think we know about it is wrong? Let's dive in. So, let's just get right to it. When you hear survival of the fittest, what pops into your head? Probably a lion chasing down its prey, right? Or maybe some ruthless CEO outmaneuvering a rival. It's all about being the biggest, the strongest, the most dominant. Or is it? The answer might actually surprise you. It's a big, resounding no. And this is where the whole misunderstanding really starts. The popular myth paints this brutal picture of nature as a constant winner-take-all brawl. But the scientific reality? Oh, it's so much more fascinating. It's a story that's less about brute force and way more about things like adaptability, efficiency, and, this is the real shocker, even cooperation. So how did we get it so twisted? Well, to figure that out, we have to go back to the very beginning. It's time to peel back the first layer of this story and uncover where this famous and, frankly, dangerous phrase actually came from. Okay, here it is, our first big aha moment. Get this. The man who gave us the entire theory of evolution by natural selection, Charles Darwin himself, did not come up with its most famous catchphrase. Nope. It came from somebody else, someone with a completely different agenda. So check out this timeline. In 1859, Darwin publishes his masterpiece and gives us the term natural selection. But it's 5 years later that a philosopher named Herbert Spencer coins survival of the fittest. And here's the twist. It was another scientist, Alfred Russel Wallace, who actually pushed a reluctant Darwin to use the phrase. Wallace thought selection sounded a little too much like some divine being was doing the choosing. Kind of ironic, given how Spencer's phrase ended up being so badly twisted. And this right here gets to the absolute core of the problem. For Spencer, this was never just about plants and animals. He saw this idea of struggle as a kind of moral engine that would improve human society. He wanted to apply it to justify his own hands-off, laissez-faire economic ideas. Basically, the belief that society gets better when the so-called unfit are just left to fail. But Darwin's idea? Totally different. For him, fittest never ever meant strongest or best in some grand universal sense. It just meant best fit for one specific local environment at one specific time. The best way to think about it is like a key and a lock. One key isn't inherently stronger than another, is it? It just happens to be the perfect shape for a particular lock. That's Darwin's fittest. So if it's not just about being the strongest, what are the real rules for survival out there? Let's unfold the next part of our model and look at the hidden layers of what fitness truly means in the natural world. This is one of my favorite examples. Our Neanderthal cousins, they were, without a doubt, physically stronger than our Homo sapiens ancestors. I mean, they had thicker bones, bigger muscles. They were built like tanks. But all that muscle came at a huge cost. It required a ton of calories to maintain. Our ancestors, with their leaner, more efficient bodies, needed less fuel to run. So when food got scarce, guess what? Being weaker was actually the better survival strategy. But adaptation isn't always about slow genetic changes over millions of years. Nature has this incredible wild card up its sleeve called phenotypic plasticity. It's the mind-blowing ability of a single organism with one set of genes to change its physical body in its own lifetime, all based on what's happening around it. It's like having a built-in toolkit to tackle challenges on the fly. And you see this everywhere. A dandelion growing in the shade will grow wider leaves to soak up more sunlight. Same genes, different shape. A tiny water flea can literally grow a protective helmet and spine when it senses that predators are near. Some tadpoles, if they find themselves in a pond with lots of protein-rich shrimp, can actually morph, growing bigger jaws to become carnivores. Now that is fitness, the ability to change, not just overpower. This brings us to another gigantic myth that needs busting, the alpha wolf. The idea of a lone wolf fighting his way to the top of the pack? Well, that whole concept came from deeply flawed studies of stressed-out, unrelated wolves that were forced together in zoos. In the wild, it's a completely different story. A wolf pack is just a family. The so-called alphas, they're just mom and dad, leading their kids and working together to survive. It's about cooperation, not constant combat. And this reveals a fundamental truth that turns the old myth on its head. Cooperation isn't some feel-good exception to the rule. It is one of the most powerful engines of evolution. In fact, some scientists are now talking about a whole new paradigm: survival of the friendliest. It's the idea that being able to form social bonds and get along might actually be a more successful strategy than pure aggression. And if you want to see this in action, just look at our closest primate relatives. You've got chimpanzees, who tend to live in very aggressive, male-dominated hierarchies. And then you have bonobos, who are famous for their cooperative, female-led groups that use social bonding, not fighting, to solve problems. The evidence suggests that the bonobo's friendlier approach often leads to greater reproductive success. It's a pretty powerful case for the evolutionary advantage of just being nice. But fittest isn't a permanent title. Not even close. What's considered fit can change in a geological blink of an eye. The most famous example, of course, is Darwin's finches. In a bad drought, the only food left was big, tough seeds. So birds with big, powerful beaks had the advantage. They were the fittest. But then the rains came back, and suddenly there were tons of small, soft seeds everywhere. And just like that, the advantage completely flipped. Now the birds with smaller, more delicate beaks were the ones who thrived. Fitness isn't a state of being, it's a moving target. Okay, now we have to turn to the final and, honestly, the most troubling part of this whole story. We have to look at the dangerous legacy this misunderstanding has left behind, and how a simple biological idea was twisted and weaponized against people. This is where we get the term social Darwinism. It's the toxic ideology that sprang directly from Herbert Spencer's ideas. It took a warped view of Darwin's science and used it to argue that the rich and powerful were at the top because they were just biologically better. It was used to claim that helping the poor and struggling was actually a bad thing because it interfered with the natural order of things. And guys like the American sociologist William Graham Sumner really ran with this. He argued that millionaires were the naturally selected agents of society. He claimed that trying to help those at the bottom was a foolish attempt to favor the survival of the unfittest. It was a dangerous twisting of biology to prop up a political agenda. And what's really sobering is that this kind of thinking didn't just vanish in the 19th century. You can see its echoes throughout history. The Gilded Age idea of a natural aristocracy of robber barons finds a pretty clear parallel in some modern makers versus takers rhetoric, which can frame society as a struggle between productive people and those who are dependent, an idea that has its roots right in Sumner's arguments. So, what's the fundamental mistake here? At its heart, it's a logical error called the naturalistic fallacy. It's the mistake of assuming that just because something is a certain way in nature, that is how it ought to be for us in human society. I mean, think about it. Nature is full of parasites and predators, but we don't argue that we ought to abandon medicine or laws. Morality is about choosing the kind of world we want to live in, not just copying the wild. Okay, so let's tie this all together. What have we learned? First, fitness is all about adaptability, not just raw strength. Second, the famous phrase wasn't even Darwin's to begin with. Third, things like cooperation and efficiency are often way more important for survival. And finally, and most importantly, getting this idea wrong has been used to justify some really harmful ideas and policies for more than a century. So, if you only remember one thing from all of this, let it be this. The fittest aren't the most ruthless. They are the most resilient. They are the ones who can adapt, cooperate, and endure in a world that is always, always changing. And that leaves us with a final question for you. Now that you know the real story behind fitness, how does that change the way you look at competition? Not just in nature, but in our own lives and in our own society. Thank you so much for spending your time learning with us today. If you found this insightful, please hit that like button and let us know in the comments what surprised you the most. And of course, subscribe to Info Now for more deep dives into the ideas that shape our world.